I've got some troubling news about England's royal family.
The room had already gone dangerously quiet when William finally said the words Harry had been fighting not to hear. There would be no reversal, no private rescue, no last-minute royal compromise. The Sussex title decision was settled, and the future king would not reopen it. Harry stared at his brother for several long seconds, pushed back his chair, and walked out. But the fury behind that slammed door was only the beginning. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. Harry had entered that meeting believing there was something left to negotiate. He was not asking for a ceremonial favor or a softer phrase. He wanted William to support reopening the Sussex arrangement before it became fixed inside future royal planning. The Sussex title, the formal royal designation connected to the Duke and Duchess of Sussex, had become more than a name to him. It was the thread linking the life he had left to the family that shaped him. William felt the weight of that request before his brother finished speaking. The prince knew why it mattered, but he also knew why he could not bend. For him, the issue had moved beyond sympathy. The monarchy's future planning, meaning the long-term structure of royal roles, duties, and public authority, could not remain trapped in uncertainty. Every exception created expectation. Every delay risked another fight. Harry froze when the answer finally came. Disbelief flashed before anger took over, because he had expected resistance, not finality. Across from him, William stayed seated, jaw tight, refusing to soften the message because it hurt. A sealed briefing beside his hand contained the agreed position. That document was not a casual memo. It was the palace assessment, setting out the decision and reasoning behind it. The conclusion had been reached before Harry walked into the room. The chair scraped back. Harry rose, turned toward the door, and stopped with one hand resting against it. William looked at him and said quietly, "There is nothing left to reopen." For a moment, neither brother moved. Then Harry looked back once, said nothing, and walked out. William did not follow. He understood that chasing him might look like doubt, and doubt was exactly what the decision was meant to end. Yet the silence that followed exposed a deeper fear. The argument over titles was finished. The argument over what remained between two brothers had only just begun. The decision may have belonged to the crown, but the wound it opened belonged to two brothers whose history made this confrontation far more personal than any title. Long before titles became the battlefield, William and Harry had shared something far more powerful: the knowledge that very few people could understand the strange world into which they had been born. That bond once made them allies. Now it makes the conflict more painful. Harry sees a brother refusing to defend him. William sees a brother asking him to compromise responsibilities he can no longer treat as private family business. Harry carried that hurt with him after leaving the room. To a trusted aide waiting nearby, he admitted in a private conversation that the deepest wound was not simply the decision itself. It was hearing the final answer from William. The Sussex designation still represented family recognition to him, even after stepping away from working royal life. For Harry, losing any possibility of reconsideration felt dangerously close to being told that distance from duty also meant distance from belonging. William remained behind, but the silence did not bring relief. The prince understood that his position had hardened because his future responsibilities were no longer theoretical. Succession, the established order determining who inherits the crown, placed him closer to decisions that could shape the monarchy for years. Royal precedent, meaning earlier decisions that influence how similar situations are handled later, mattered too. What once might have been settled privately between brothers now carried consequences far beyond them. William reached for Harry's untouched glass, lifted it slightly, then set it down again. "He thought I could change it," he told an aide quietly. The words carried no triumph. They sounded closer to regret. He knew his brother had entered the meeting expecting resistance, negotiation, perhaps even sympathy strong enough to reopen the question. Instead, he had met a boundary that the future king believed could no longer move. Harry felt something different: abandonment. He believed there had once been an unspoken understanding that whatever happened publicly, his place inside the wider family would never become purely technical. In his mind, previous private compromises had proved that room could always be found. William saw those same concessions very differently. To him, every exception had postponed clarity and encouraged another round of expectations. That difference cut deeper than either man wanted to admit. One brother remembered flexibility as proof that family still came first. The other remembered it as the reason the conflict never truly ended. And beneath both versions of the past sat one moment neither could escape. Months earlier, a private family dinner had changed the direction of everything. What was said across that table would become the point William could no longer forget, and the moment Harry would later remember as the first real warning that the door was beginning to close. The final decision did not begin with Harry walking out of a room. It began months earlier at a private family dinner that was supposed to lower the temperature. Instead, one sentence changed everything. What started as an attempt to rebuild trust became the moment William concluded that the Sussex question could no longer remain flexible. By the time the evening ended, the future confrontation between the brothers had already been set in motion, even if neither man understood it yet. Charles had allowed the uncertainty to survive because he still believed family repair needed space. The king had resisted forcing an immediate settlement, hoping time might soften positions that had hardened through years of mistrust. That mattered, because the Sussex question was no longer only about one title. It had become tied to belonging, future expectations, and whether private family affection could still influence formal royal decisions. William accepted that ambiguity for longer than he wanted. The prince respected his father's instinct to preserve room for reconciliation, and he feared that drawing a hard administrative line would turn an already damaged relationship into something permanent. But he also understood that every delay carried a cost. The longer the position remained undefined, the easier it became for different people to believe completely different outcomes were still possible. Harry arrived at the dinner expecting movement. He read the invitation as a sign that greater recognition might still be restored, and spoke with the confidence of someone who believed the door had never fully closed. Halfway through the conversation, William realized the problem. His brother did not see flexibility as patience. He saw it as a promise. Harry leaned into that belief and told him family loyalty should come before institutional caution. The words struck harder than intended. William heard something deeper inside them, a suggestion that his growing responsibilities as heir were merely excuses. The heir, meaning the person next in line to inherit the crown, had spent years learning that private choices could become public precedents. Now he felt his brother was asking him to ignore that burden. William laid down his fork. Harry looked across the table and said, "When the time comes, you'll put this right." The answer came immediately. "You cannot build your future on that assumption." Silence followed. Neither brother touched the rest of the meal. William left that evening with the argument still burning in his mind. He asked for a formal briefing, a written assessment explaining what royal authority could realistically be reconsidered, and what could not. That request started the chain that would later produce the sealed position waiting beside him in the meeting Harry stormed out of. Months later, that unfinished dinner conversation would return with greater force. Except this time, William would have a decision in front of him, and Harry would have nowhere left to hide from its meaning. Harry does not leave immediately. Before the door closes, years of resentment finally break through the careful language both brothers have been using. He turns back toward William and accuses him of choosing the institution over blood. The accusation lands harder than either expects. William rises from his chair. The conversation is no longer about procedure, precedent, or titles. For several brutal minutes, it becomes a reckoning over loyalty, abandonment, duty, and everything neither brother has forgiven. Harry steps back into the room when William tells him not to reduce everything to betrayal. The prince knows the moment has already moved beyond the sealed briefing, sitting between them. His position now carries constitutional weight, meaning his words and promises can affect how the monarchy is expected to operate in the future. What he once might have offered privately as a brother can no longer be separated so easily from what people may later expect from a king. Harry hears that explanation and becomes even angrier. He accuses William of turning responsibility into distance, of hiding behind duty whenever the family becomes difficult. To him, the message is brutal. Palace stability matters more than the brother standing in front of him. He says the future king has learned how to defend the institution perfectly, while forgetting how to defend the people closest to him. William finally loses some of his restraint. He tells Harry that reconciliation cannot mean removing every boundary the moment that boundary causes pain. His voice hardens because he believes the same pattern has repeated for too long. Every compromise creates another expectation. Every temporary solution becomes proof, in Harry's mind, that the next exception should also be possible. Harry then reveals what he had been counting on. He believed Charles would ultimately stop the settlement if William objected strongly enough. The king still held the highest authority in the family, and Harry had assumed his father would hesitate before allowing anything to become truly permanent. But William's silence tells him something has changed. Harry points toward the briefing. "You didn't inherit that decision. You helped make it." William does not deny it. He admits he personally supported ending the ambiguity, because leaving the issue open would only guarantee another crisis later. Worse still, he confirms that Charles already knew his position. That truth lands harder than the original refusal. Harry had imagined himself fighting palace caution, advisors, perhaps even tradition. Now he understands that his own brother had helped close the door before he entered the room. William watches the anger shift across Harry's face and realizes the next confrontation is already forming. The question is no longer whether the decision can be changed. It is why their father approved it. That admission changes everything, because Harry is no longer fighting an impersonal palace machine. He is facing a decision his own brother deliberately helped shape. The brothers may carry the emotional weight of the confrontation, but the decision cannot be understood without Charles. He had spent months trying to preserve two things that increasingly seemed impossible to hold together: a path back toward his younger son and a stable future for the monarchy. Eventually, he was forced to decide which uncertainty he could continue carrying. And when William presented his recommendation, the king's response was quieter and more final than Harry ever expected. Charles understood that every choice now carried two different meanings. As a father, he wanted to leave room for repair. As monarch, he also had to consider succession planning, the long-term preparation for how royal duties and authority pass into the next reign. William was already carrying more of that future burden, and the prince had become increasingly convinced that uncertainty around the Sussex position could not simply be passed forward. Charles resisted finality for as long as he could. Advisors had warned that leaving expectations unresolved was creating fresh tension, but the king still feared what a permanent answer would mean emotionally. To him, closing the question felt dangerously close to closing a door on Harry himself. That was the conflict he could not escape. The institution needed clarity, while the father in him still wanted space. William placed his recommendation before him without triumph. He told Charles he did not want Harry embarrassed, punished, or publicly humiliated. What he wanted was an end to promises made through silence. Every time the family avoided saying no, His brother heard possibility. Every time they delayed, hope grew around an outcome nobody was actually prepared to deliver. Charles read the briefing alone. He removed his glasses, set them beside the pages, and remained silent for several long moments. The briefing was a formal written assessment of the options, risks, and final position available to the Crown. Nothing in it sounded emotional. Yet he knew every line would eventually land on his younger son as something deeply personal. Charles finally picked up his pen. He wrote a short approval beside William's recommendation and set it down again. "Then, we must stop leaving him to expect what we cannot give," he said. The prince did not celebrate. He understood immediately what those words meant. The king made one more decision. He would not personally deliver the answer to Harry. The future consequences, he believed, would eventually belong to William's reign, and the brothers needed to confront that reality directly. That choice made their later collision almost unavoidable. And once Harry realized both his father and brother had accepted the same conclusion, the anger he carried out of that room would no longer stay contained inside palace walls. Harry expects anger. He expects hurried calls. Perhaps even someone sent down the corridor to bring him back. Instead, nothing happens. Minutes pass, and the silence becomes its own answer. Nobody reverses William's words. Nobody asks the brothers to restart the meeting. For the first time, Harry confronts the possibility that the palace is prepared to let him walk away rather than reopen the decision. And that realization hurts more deeply than the confrontation itself. Harry moves quickly after leaving the room and tells an aide to bring his departure arrangements forward. The suggestion that he wait, cool down, and reconsider is rejected almost immediately. He has already heard the one answer he came hoping to avoid. Inside, palace staff receive equally clear instructions. The meeting is finished. The agreed position remains unchanged, and no new negotiation will begin that evening. What had once been treated as a family dispute has now crossed into something far more fixed. Harry checks his phone again. Nothing from William. Nothing from Charles. The silence begins to feel deliberate, and that hurts, because part of him still expects someone to come after him. He had spent years believing that however bitter the arguments became, family would eventually break through the formality. Now every passing minute suggests something different. William stands near the desk when an aide tells him Harry is preparing to leave. The prince almost responds immediately. He considers asking someone to stop his brother, then catches himself. Calling him back now could sound like hesitation, and hesitation would reopen the very uncertainty they had finally closed. Duty gives him the answer. Emotion makes accepting it much harder. Harry's phone finally lights up. Charles has sent a short personal message asking to speak with him later. The king makes one thing unmistakably clear. The conversation would be about father and son, not about reversing the Sussex decision. Harry reads the message twice. He locks the phone and looks toward the waiting aide. "So that's it," he says, his voice far quieter than before. William hears about the message and privately admits to the same aide that this was always the consequence he feared. Once Harry understood there was no bargaining point left, every future conversation would have to begin somewhere else. No title negotiation, no expectation of reversal, just two brothers facing what remained when the argument was finally removed. Harry prepares to leave, believing that silence has delivered the final verdict. But before he can go, that silence breaks. William makes one last choice. He leaves the briefing behind, dismisses the advisors, and goes to find his brother with nothing institutional left between them. This time, William carries no folder. No advisor walks beside him. No carefully prepared palace language protects either man. He finds Harry before his departure and asks for 5 minutes, not as heir, not as the guardian of a royal settlement, but simply as his brother. The decision will not change. William makes that clear immediately. Yet what follows becomes the first conversation of the day in which neither man is fighting to win. And that difference changes everything. Harry agrees only after William promises he has not come to defend the briefing again. The prince knows the title settlement is already fixed, but he has finally understood that a second question has become just as dangerous: whether an irreversible royal decision also has to create an irreversible personal break. For the first time since the confrontation began, there are no advisors nearby to translate emotion into official language. Harry speaks first. He admits that hearing "no going back" did not feel like the closing of a technical argument. It felt like being told that part of his place in the family had been erased. The constitutional question, meaning the issue of how royal authority and formal status are handled within the monarchy, had become inseparable from something much more personal in his mind. He could accept disagreement more easily than he could accept feeling discarded. William listens without interrupting. Then he tells his brother that refusing to reopen the arrangement is not the same as refusing him. He knows years of anger have made that distinction difficult to believe, but he refuses to let the decision become proof that Harry has been removed from the family itself. The future king cannot offer restoration. He can still offer recognition. William then shares something Harry had not known. During the drafting of the final position, he had rejected language that could have turned the settlement into a public rebuke. He had insisted that nothing in the formal decision attack his brother personally or present the outcome as punishment. That detail does not change the result, but it changes the way Harry hears the man standing in front of him. Harry does not apologize for storming out. He does not pretend the anger has vanished. But some of its sharpness begins to fade when he understands that firmness and humiliation had not been the same thing in William's mind. William finally says, "I cannot undo the decision. I can still refuse to make you my enemy." Harry looks away before answering, "Then don't." The brothers part without anything resembling a perfect reconciliation. But the next chapter will be written far beyond that private conversation. Because once the Sussex decision reaches the public, the world will see the boundary, without seeing the 5 minutes that changed what it meant. By morning, the conflict no longer belongs only to Harry and William. The Sussex decision dominates conversation beyond palace walls, turning one private confrontation into a national argument about duty, family, privilege, and whether royal identity can survive separation from royal service. Yet amid the headlines and commentary, one image captures the entire crisis. Crowds gathering outside Buckingham Palace, while the words, "No going back," stare from a newspaper front page. Harry watches the coverage away from the palace, and feels the story slipping further from what actually happened between the brothers. Broadcasters describe firmness, defeat, and royal authority, while palace staff keep their public response restrained. They confirm only that family discussions took place, and that existing arrangements remain unchanged. For the monarchy, that wording matters, because it avoids turning a painful family clash into an official spectacle. For Harry, it feels painfully incomplete. William sees the same headlines and reacts differently. The prince understands why commentators are reading the moment as a sign of how he may shape the future monarchy, but he rejects the idea that he has scored some personal victory. Royal authority, meaning the formal power and responsibility attached to a working position within the crown, is being treated separately from family belonging. That distinction is exactly what he tried to explain privately, yet public coverage reduces everything to winners and losers. Harry grows visibly frustrated, as one discussion describes him as having been forced into retreat. He knows the title decision is final, but hearing his private pain turned into a public contest sharpens the humiliation he thought William had tried to avoid. The anger returns, though differently now. He is no longer expecting reversal. He is reacting to the feeling that strangers are deciding what his relationship with his own family means. Outside Buckingham Palace, The argument becomes impossible to ignore. A mourning crowd gathers near the gates as television crews capture a newspaper held toward the cameras. Across the front page runs the fictional headline, "No going back. William draws the line." Within hours, that single phrase becomes the public symbol of the confrontation. William hears a commentator describe Harry as defeated and reaches for the television remote. He switches it off. That is not what happened, he tells an aide quietly. The future king knows something the audience does not. Behind the hard boundary, the brothers had already agreed not to turn each other into enemies. The noise eventually begins to fade, but one truth remains. The crown has drawn its boundary. The title question is settled. What remains is more personal and far more difficult. The headlines declare a winner and a loser, but the final truth is deeper. Two brothers now have to decide what family means when there is truly no going back. In the end, nobody changes the decision. William does not retreat. Charles does not intervene. Harry does not receive the reversal he came hoping to secure. The Sussex settlement remains exactly where the confrontation left it, final. But something else becomes clear after the anger fades. The true meaning of this moment was never simply that one brother won and another lost. It was that the monarchy finally separated two questions it had spent years dangerously mixing together: royal authority and family love. William holds his position because reopening the arrangement would return everyone to the same cycle of expectation and disappointment. The prince now sees institutional certainty as necessary, not cruel. For the monarchy, certainty means the rules surrounding public duties, formal status, and future authority are no longer left open to competing interpretations. That clarity comes at a personal cost, but it also ends the uncertainty that had kept every private conversation tied to the same unresolved demand. Charles accepts that cost with sadness. The king understands that his earlier reluctance to close the question had allowed hope to survive longer than the family could honestly support. What once felt compassionate had gradually become damaging. By refusing to intervene now, he accepts that love cannot always be expressed by leaving every door open. Harry leaves wounded, but not with the same fury that carried him out of the original meeting. His final conversation with William has changed the emotional meaning of the day. He still believes something important has been taken from him, yet he no longer sees the decision as proof that his brother wants him erased from the family. William carries his own pain forward. The future king has protected the boundary he believed necessary, but victory is the wrong word for what he feels. Responsibility has forced him to refuse the person he once most wanted to reassure. That is the price of the decision, and he knows it. Harry checks his phone before leaving. A message from William waits there. "Safe journey. We'll speak soon." He reads it once, pauses, then types 2 words. "All right." There is no grand reconciliation, no dramatic embrace, just a small agreement that future contact will not depend on reopening the title question. That becomes the final meaning of the confrontation. Harry storming out marked the death of one expectation, not the destruction of every family bond. William's refusal permanently closed the institutional argument, while their final exchange prevented that closure from becoming total personal rejection. There was no going back on the Sussex decision. But once both brothers accepted that truth, they were finally forced to stop fighting over the past and decide what relationship could still exist beyond the crown. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.